Hey everybody, this is Cody922 here, and today I'm coming at you with episode number 11 of Cody Talks Fanfiction. Just a quick reminder, at the time of the release of this video, there will be exactly one day between, there will be exactly 24 hours, ideally, before the interview with, Kobayashi will be taking place. So once again, if you have read The White Rose of Vermilion and you have any questions for Kobayashi, do leave them in the comments below. I have gotten 0 questions so far, and I really want to try and get some for Kobayashi's sake. But otherwise, y'all are here to see this episode. And this episode is an episode that I probably should have done a while ago, but I never decided to do it until episode number 9, actually, what was going to be episode 9, but then I fucked up and lost the video file, and now it's going to be episode number 11. So, the theme for this episode is going to be the OTP episode. And so what the OTP episode just means is it's going to be the main one true pairings for all the characters. There will be no repeat characters. For example, you will not see Monochrome in this one because I have something else involving both Blake and Weiss. I think everybody can guess what it is. These are just like the main pairings, and this is like what I think for each characters have like the biggest push behind them. So just briefly, I will list all of the pairings for all of your sakes. So those pairings will be White Rose, Bumblebee, Norin, and Akros. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I think everything else y'all can figure out, and if you can't, I'm sorry. So let's just get this thing going, honestly, right off the bat. Let's tackle Another Day at Beacon by Alley Cat Sunflower. Jean has no idea what he's doing. Nora is hyperactive, Pyrrha is composed but overwhelmed, and Ren just wants some peace. Ladies and gentlemen, Team Juniper. With a room shared between the 4 dissipate personalities, what shenanigans can ensure over the school year? Centers on Ren and Nora, Jean and Pierre are just along for a ride. Various ships and friendships, I do not own RWBY. First of all, DISPARATE. Never seen that word before, so go me. My apologies to Alley Cat Sunflower if I fuck this up. Yeah, so that's, this is a fluff story. I will say this. Not every story that I do today is a fluff story necessarily. This is total fluff, 100% through and through. And I did pick this one. There's not a whole lot that I can say about it plot-wise because it doesn't have much plot yet. It's kind of like going through a typical life in the day of a Beacon student, except it's not focusing on that part where they go to class to learn how to kill monsters. It's like everything else that kind of is around it. All of the crap that Nora brings with her somewhat, and, you know, by all the crap, by the way, I mean like all the attention that she tends to draw. And this is just kind of focusing on the more human side of things rather than the fighting Grimm side of things. There's a chapter in which combat actually occurs. Yeah, that we'll get into that chapter later, but for the most part, there's not a whole lot that I can explain because this is like through and through fluff. So first things first, though, the ship for this one is Noren, where it kind of centers around those two, and it's kind of funny. The author set it up so that way both of them want to be with each other, and neither one of them is willing to say anything. So it's just kind of like an awkward. Oh, also, I should have said this earlier. I do want to apologize if I sound any strange. I'm kind of congested this morning, so yeah, go me. So Norin is definitely takes center stage here. I don't really think that there's been a whole lot of time to focus on any of the other ships. I'm fine with that, by the way. I think that the author came in and they knew what they were going to focus on. So kudos to them for focusing on them. My personal opinions of this ship, Norin. I think it's the best Nora and Nora center. Who the fuck made this tunnel? Oh, you know, this might be Nobles. Nora. I think that The way that the author handled Nora is great. I think that Nora is kind of like, the way that Nora is in the show is kind of always on the verge of being too much, and kind of Nora and Ren centered stories, or just Nora centered stories, always have me nervous because Nora, you could have this thing where Nora is like perfect in just the right amounts, but too much can be too much, and I think it's like that with a lot of characters, especially if they're overdone. But this Nora is actually done a little bit more subtly than others, which is not saying a whole lot, by the way. I would like to point that out, that just because Nora is slightly more subtle, that does not mean a whole lot for how subtle she actually is. But it is nice to see an author not trying to shoot for the moon, with having Nora just be like 24/7 crazy, where it is just where there is another side to Nora. I think that the way that this author handles interactions between the characters is also pretty great, where Jean and Ren have no idea what the hell is going on with Nora, and Ren is just, or Jean and Pyrrha is what I meant to say. I think I said Jean and Ren. But they just have no idea what the hell is going on between with Nora, and Ren's just kind of like, yeah, you guys are gonna have to just go with it. I think it's great. RWBY doesn't really have much of a big role in this, but they are featured, and I think that they're done well while they're in it. Otherwise, there's not much more that I can really say, because one more thing. I do like the fact that this author, which is actually kind of a different pace of things, has Ren being very disapproving of Jean and the way that he leads. I really, really like this, actually, because it's so often that we see Ren trying to be the supporting character to Jean. Like, he's trying to be Jean's support. And it feels much better. I don't want to use the word better. It feels much more probable that Ren would just kind of be like, this guy's our leader. Are you kidding me? Like, it feels like Ren's personality feels like it would lead him more towards that rather than supporting. And I think it's great. I honestly think that more authors should do this with Ren. And I think that it's a wonderful idea. I'm not quite sure why more people haven't done this, to be honest. But, we learn. But I think that as time goes on, more people will kind of adapt this role. If we learn more about Ren, this role will either thrive more or die more. I don't really care what happens. I'm just kind of excited to learn more about Ren. But I think that Ren, that side of Ren is done beautifully. But on some other things, I don't like the way that Ren is mostly handled. I did just say that I do like the fact that Ren is disapproving of Jean, and I really like that. But I don't like the other ways that Ren is handled. And now what I mean by that is that Ren in this story is a very open character. Is a much more open character. Not open to himself, but he's much more talkative, and he's much more willing to say things and stuff. And it feels strange, honestly, because the Ren that we so far have gotten to know is very, very sealed lips. Seems like he only says something when he deems it important to say something. I'm giving up on you. And I don't like that side of it, but it's to each their own, I guess. And the other thing is that this story is very, very solid all through and through. I mean, it's fluff. You can't expect a ton from it, honestly, because there's only so many different things that you can get from a fluff story, especially one as fluffy as this. But there is a chapter later on in the story, chapter 5, and it is it's bad. It's not done well. Basically, chapter 5 was them introducing all of the other ships, such as Star Students was one of them. Crimson Knight, I believe, is the name of Jean and RWBY. Actually, let me pull up the spreadsheet real fast. I might include this in the link thing if y'all want to take a look at it. Jean. No, it is called Crater Face, actually. So Crater Face is going to be a thing in there. By the way, star students is Weiss and Pyrrha. It looks like it'll be Bumblebee, if I remember correctly. Yeah, it'll be Bumblebee, as there's not really any other ships, and I actually like that the author included. I don't care if you don't ship the things that I do. But I thought that it was not a well done chapter. I think that the author tried to do too much and try to get too much out of the way in the process of doing this, and I think that it really wound up hurting the story rather than helping it a little bit. Whereas before, it had been solid. Honestly, it had been very few complaints. I have the one thing about Ren, but really nothing else, because the author just solid job. But this chapter is kind of a turn off towards the story, towards future chapters of the story. That being said, I still really enjoyed the story. I'm still looking forward to future chapters. I just think that, if chapter 5 was not there, it would have been a better story overall because of it. Or sorry, maybe not there, but maybe if chapter 5 had been done better overall, I would have enjoyed this story much, much more. But it's there, and I think that it's still a good story. I think that it's still a very good story, and at the end of the day, I would have to give it a 7 out of 10, because I'm for the most part not willing to go much higher on fluff things, especially one like that. I believe I gave Icy Rose a 7 out of 10 as well, even though that would actually change. That would have changed if I were to do a re-review on it, just given some more recent chapters, but I think that Alley Cat Sunflower did a very good job with this. I think that she is got a pretty good grasp on characters' personalities. She's got a great grasp on how they interact with each other. And I'd say that this is definitely a worthwhile read. And now we are moving on. So from Norrin to my third favorite OTP, we're going to Akros with Pyrrhic Victory, the story that I've been trying to find a way to work into this goddamn series for a very long time. Pyrrhic Victory by the Rogue King. A story revolving around Pyrrha's affections for her goofball of a leader, Jean's total obliviousness to all the hijinks between them, and of course the rest of the RWBY cast will be there to put in their own useless opinion. Pyrrhic Victory, not much more that I can say. This story has been top 10 for roughly 6 centuries. I actually just managed to surpass Pyrrhic Victory, so haha, I'm just kidding. I'm not worthy. I thought that this was one of the very first stories that I read when I took my first hiatus to read. When I took my hiatus to read, I should say. This was like either the first or the second story that I read. It was White Rose of Vermilion, I know was first or second as well. And I was really impressed by this. I think that going into it, I didn't have a great opinion on fluff as a whole. I know that In Love with the Gardener existed, and that was like phenomenal to me, and I loved In Love with the Gardener, not to be funny. But overall though, with In Love, but then overall fluff community is kind of like meh. But this story really did do a really great job with kind of making fluff feel like something more than just fluff. And I was impressed by it, and I really, really am happy that the story exists. So, basic summary of the plot. That was it. That was essentially the summary of the plot, honestly. There's not a whole lot more to it. It's Pyrrha wants Jean. She wants the booty, and she's trying to get Jean. And he is just like being totally oblivious to all of her things, and later on you learn it's intentional, or all of her advances, and then later on you learn that it's intentional. And there was just a lot of good, nice little twists and turns to read along with. Definitely though, there are some things that I would like to specifically talk about. One is probably Pyrrha's determination. I like the idea that Pyrrha is like the star student, was the star student at Sanctum, and she won the Mr. Regional tournament 4 years in a row. That means that she has a certain level of perseverance to her, where she's not going to give up, where one thing is not going to deter her from her ultimate goal. And that's exactly what this story did, and I thought it was great. I think that this would be very similar to how Pyrrha would hunt in general, is that she would not give up until she reached her end goal. Another thing that I did like was kind of the cast kind of teasingly helping Pyrrha along, and I thought that was wonderful. There's I think that personalities were all done very well. I think that I can't really point to one specific relationship between people and say this was done better than everything else. But what I can say is that everything was done great. I think that I already pointed out Pyrrha's perseverance was awesome, and I think that as kind of time went on, you warmed up and warmed down to Jean a little bit. I think that it had a very similar style to what the actual RWBY show did, where there were times when you liked John, and there were times when you liked Jean, and there were times where you didn't. But I think that the times that you liked Jean outweighed the times that you did not. Some other things to the story, though, is that Pyrrhic Victory is actually a big reason for the Trendsetter episode and some of the trends that I said I wanted killed. The only part of this story that I skipped was when Pyrrha requested Yang to be a terrible person and a bully, which Yang basically was the entire story as well. She was kind of an antagonist. I really didn't like this, honestly. I found it getting on my nerves. I found it really obnoxious, just from the standpoint of Yang seems to me to be more like a team mother personality, honestly, rather than party girl, sure, but team mother. And I don't think that she would do all of the things that she did in this story. And it was just kind of like a constant barrage of that it was really hard to keep reading. But from there, I think that everything went over quite nicely. I think that Yang in general, good intentions, bad act. No, not even good intentions. She wanted to make Pyrrha miserable for a fair portion of this story, and it felt wrong. It felt really, really wrong to me. Ren is the mediator is another one that I brought up in the Trendsetter episode, and he was the mediator in here. He was offering his help as often as he possibly could, and that felt also very wrong. I feel as though Ren is like kind of the quiet personality. But otherwise, there's actually really no other cons to this story. I think that apart from like those few out of character things, it's pretty much flawless, which is kind of funny actually, or at least I think so. That they the whole one of the inspirations for the Trendsetter episode, and I really don't have much negativity things to say about it, but I mean overall it's a very good story. It made it feel like something more than fluff, and apart from the Yang portions being very difficult to read and not in a good way, I think that overall it was a very solid job. So overall, I would say 8 out of 10 for this story. I think it's great. I think it's a great story. I definitely would recommend it to anybody. Not my recommendation of the video, though. Close, but no cigar. Now, moving on to a name that might sound familiar, Life of a White Rose by NobleMETA. Wai Shini, the Ice Queen as most people called her, came to Beacon Academy for many reasons. Not even Weiss herself could have seen what was to come from attending Beacon, meeting RWBY, and how it would impact her life forever. What began as a rocky relationship filled with malice and contempt became molded into a brittle friendship and then sculpted into a beautiful love. That's actually a very lovely description. Life of a White Rose by NobleMETA. Some people here might know NobleMETA, or some people here might remember NobleMETA as he was on as a guest star for the episode NobleMETA Speaks, where he talked about some stories, and I kind of hosted and provided a little bit of back and forth with him. I really, really like this story, and I'm not just saying that because of NobleMETA. I did start reading it because NobleMETA did reach out to me and say, hey, I would like to appear on Cody Talks Fan Fiction as an author. I'm like, well, I might as well know what this guy does beforehand. So I, clicked on Life of a White Rose, given the fact that it was the most followed and favorited story that he had by a pretty wide margin as well. It's top 25 last I checked. And I did check it out because of that reason. And I was not disappointed. I thought it was a really good story. I think that it's not fluff. And this is one of the instances I realized that the first two stories that I had were fluff. And this story is romance, finally. And I think that, overall plot summary wise, that does a good job of it. It's hard to really go into depth in the plot because there's a lot of things that change over time. But kind of the summary, kind of the start of the story, whoops, activated Siri. Fuck off. Sorry. But I think that the beginning of the story, I'm just going through real fast. Yeah, it's story starts off and it's just kind of RWBY trying to do fun activities with Weiss, and Weiss getting on RWBY's case a little bit, and Yang not really liking Weiss, as Yang often does in most stories, and I don't really blame Yang sometimes. But over time the story, obviously, RWBY and Weiss, they do get together. Spoiler alert, not really, because the story is titled Life of a White Rose. I'm really glad that nobody's got mad at me for saying what the pairings are for this stuff. But I think that it's done quite well. Some things that I do think are pluses to it are, I'd have to say that Weiss in general with her, I think that Weiss is done wonderfully in this story, and that she is overall maybe the best done in this story. I'd be willing to say that. I think that she's probably the best. Oh, sorry. Best done for this particular story. I should clarify that. I'd be willing to say that. I do like the way that RWBY is handled. I do like the way that Blake is handled. Boo for Dawn over Bumblebee. Boo. But Sun is useful in the story. He becomes a pretty big piece of things. I like the plot to the story. I really do. I think it's great. I like the short chapters because even though it says 48 chapters long, it's 48, right? Do I have that right? Screw it. I have it right. It is only... 48 chapters long. It's only about 90,000 words, which is not a whole lot, honestly, for 48 chapters of work. Especially with some of the chapters being being kind of longer, and he did that intentionally. He wanted to make it easier for people to binge read his story, which I am appreciative of, but at the same time, it does cause some issues, which I will now go into a little bit. One of the issues that I noticed is that he has pacing is kind of an issue. The short chapters often lead to seeming rushed and seeming done too soon, and something seeming skipped over. Another thing that I did say in the Trendsetter episode, though I read the story after that, would have to be the fact that this story is... The Achievement Hunter references is what I want to say. They are overdone in this story, and that's one of the things that I brought up. Achievement Hunter Rooster Teeth references being overdone. They are really heavily overdone in this story. It started off with a festival with the host being Bernie Burns, and it was just kind of like, okay, this is a little bit too in your face. I mean, I try to sneak in a couple subtle, like I always say, I always try to sneak in a couple subtle ones when I get the opportunity to. Like I had a nice little golden boots jester thing, but I don't want it to be in your face. And I think that it is in your face with this story. Big issue that I had with this story though was a series that played out where I'm going to say spoiler alert, because this is kind of a big deal, but it happens earlier on in the story, so I don't feel the need to remain as quiet about it. Where Weiss gets killed, quote unquote, but they fake her death, and Osmond takes her to 3 other students from 3 other kingdoms, and she is and it's like a secret mission and whatnot that is held specifically for her. Also, I should say the story may be called Life of a White Rose, but it is definitely more Weiss centered than RWBY centered. And I felt as though that part could have been really great. What with RWBY having to deal with the pain, that thinking that her girlfriend, one of the people that she treasures most, is dead, and Weiss having to deal with the regret of being forced to leave RWBY. I think that this sequence could have been really, really great, but it wasn't. It was rushed heavily. You got one opportunity. Count it. One opportunity in the whole thing to really feel what Weiss was feeling. Otherwise, it all felt strictly business. Or to get a chance to feel something. Otherwise, everything else was strictly business. And I think that what could have taken the story up a couple notches wound up knocking it down a couple notches. It was so close. Not even. It was not really that close to being that great because it was the right idea, bad actions. I think that that's what this one boils down to. That NobleMETA had the correct idea for things to do. I think that, just kind of the whole, oh, I'm not really dead thing can turn out really, really great, but it just not in this case. So unfortunately, got to knock it down a little bit for that one. Otherwise, though, I think that apart from the very obvious pacing issues and that one sequence, I think it's a really good story. And I definitely think it's a worthwhile read. White Rose was actually going to be my closing ship, but there was unfortunately another story that stole my heart even more. But I will say this, overall, I'd probably give it 7. Another 7 out of 10. Giving out lots of 7s this video, but I think that's right what this story gets. I think that its inclusion of plot is a welcome refreshing side of things. But I think that the plot was not done great, so I will put it as where I put fluff stories. And moving on to the final story, my personal favorite story of the video, one of top 10 for me easily. This is going to be Of Crimson and Gold by Rise from Shadows. Even if it meant starting a war that could very well destroy the whole world, to her, saving Blake Belladonna was worth every drop of blood that would be shed. Supernatural AU, mainly Bumblebee. And that is your OTP for this theme, Bumblebee. Supernatural AU. That basically means vampires, wares, as they're called in this one, gods. Actually, it's the Greek gods. That felt a little strange. But anyways, when I first read the description for this story, and I saw Supernatural AU, when I was looking for a Bumblebee story to read, I saw Supernatural AU, I just remember thinking, Twilight fans have already ruined one thing for me, and now they're going to ruin something else. This did not ruin anything for me. This was phenomenal. What kind of the idea behind this story is that Yang is a vampire. And she's been alive for however many thousands of years. RWBY is another vampire. Like, she's somebody that Yang turned when, instead of letting RWBY die, she turned RWBY into a vampire. And it's just the way that things play out in this story. God, this is a fantastic story. Yang meets Blake when she goes out hunting, and she doesn't kill Blake. And so, I'm not set to busy. And instead, Yang kind of follows Blake because Blake reminds her of somebody from her past. And so Yang pursues this, finds out that it's not them, and then it's just kind of like, okay, so who is this girl? Blake Belladonna turns out to be a huntress who is in charge with the kingdom safekeeping that can use shadow kinesis. Also, it's not called like semblances and whatnot, it's called kinesis in this. Probably should include that before I describe the story more. Finds out that she can use shadow kinesis, and like a whole big thing is stirred up, and then there's a council of Greek gods. Pyrrha is actually dead already. Pyrrha was Yang's former partner, which is now taken over by RWBY. And Pyrrha's also dead. And I think, though, that this story is my favorite from this week. It's my recommendation of the video, and it's a really good recommendation for me overall. The way that this story has gone about with the whole supernatural theme was like, oh, this is going to be cliche, or this is going to be bad, but it really was not. I think that the way that everything was handled in just the right amounts, to the point where, you know, things seemed like a surprise to Blake when she learned about them, where she only knew about Grimm, and that was the only real supernatural thing that she knew about, because she was a huntress. But, you know, and then as time goes on, Yang gets closer to Blake, and then more things come out about what Yang is, and what Blake is actually, too, becomes kind of an important part of the story, which I will not go into. But it is just so... It's so well done on so many levels. More specifically, I like Yang. Yang in and of herself is a very aggressive character. And in time, we learned that vampires can drink blood without killing people, but Yang can't, because that's just the way that she was taught. But I like this just from the standpoint of Yang is so aggressive that not being able to stop seems very much so like what she would do, and being able to stop being very much so like what RWBY would do, which is the case in this particular story. And I thought it was great. I thought it was really well done. Another thing I would like to say about the story: thank you so much for not having Yang get kidnapped by the White Fang, like every other fucking Bumblebee story, where Yang somehow winds up kidnapped by the White Fang. Another thing, though, to the story is the universe feels very real. It's too hard to believe could actually exist. But this universe, it feels, when you're reading it, like it's a very real universe. In that you could buy into this actually existing. It's done with that much detail, it's done with that much care, to the point where, you know, even the things, it's done like on the level of where things are kept secret, but you never would notice. And I think that, you know, that's that can be hard to do with a universe like this. I think that it could be hard to do, but it's very believable. It's a very believable thing. And I cannot praise the story. I cannot praise the story enough. And I think that, you know, anything that I don't want to leave anything out, but I'm going to have to move on to some other things that I would like fixed about this story. Or some things that I did not like as much about this story. But honestly, this was great. I think that this is the best purely Bumblebee fanfic that I've read. It does include White Rose a little bit, side notes of it, but I think that this is the best Bumblebee-centered fanfic that I've read, by a long shot. And I definitely would like to say that, you know, once again, recommendation of the video, but some things about it. The Council of the Gods is Greek gods. Hephaestus, Zeus, Poseidon, etc., Athena, whatever. All of those are great characters in Smite. But I think that felt out of place. That felt out of place and very incorrect. And at the end of the day, I would have rather it not be there. And another, I don't feel as though that has been done. How do I phrase this? I really don't like the Greek gods being there. Honestly, like I said, they feel out of place. And every time it cuts to like a meeting with them, I just picture them from like Percy Jackson in that big room where they were all massive, even though they're actually not in the story. But I would really have preferred it to not be there. The other thing about this story that I kind of wish had been changed is that there's a lot of... The pacing of the story is very good. I will say that the pacing of this story is good, but there's a lot of times when heated arguments just end too easily. I think that, and by a lot of times I mean most of the time, I think that, you know, Yang and Blake do get into a lot of arguments over creative differences, let's put it that way. But then they kind of resolve easily, and I don't like that. I wish they would last a little bit longer, but really that's like the only two negative points that I can find in this story. I think it's phenomenal, and at the end of the day, I'd say 9.5 out of 10. It's definitely top 10 stories for me at this point. I think I could safely put it in top 10, maybe top 5, if I look at the list overall. But worthwhile read by a lot. Once again, recommendation of the video, and that's gonna conclude Cody Talks Fanfiction for this week. Tune in next Wednesday when I will have a new theme to talk about. Tune in tomorrow where I'll be doing an AMA on the RWBY OC subreddit. The link will be in the description to the subreddit. 12 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, 3 o'clock Eastern Time, 2 o'clock 2 o'clock Central Standard Time, and also tune in next Thursday when I will be interviewing Korebayashi. So, for now, bye!